meaningful dialogues that connect the past with the present. As part of our efforts to disseminate heritage knowledge, the Pleach Talk series has been fortunate to host distinguished speakers from across the disciplines of history, archaeology, and heritage conservation, receiving immense support and appreciation from our ever-growing audience. Our speaker today is a dynamic archaeologist and writer who has been actively reshaping our understanding of India's past, Ms. Disha Ahluwalia. Ms. Ahluwalia is an archaeologist, columnist for The Print, and founder of an organization called Confessions of an Archaeologist. She is currently pursuing her PhD at the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda, specializing in landscape archaeology, ceramic analysis, and the cultural history of proto-historic South Asia. With more than a decade of field experience, she has supervised excavations at some of the most significant Harappan sites, including Rakhigarhi, Binjur, and Sinoli. Her research integrates archaeology with environmental and spatial data using GIS-based approaches to better understand settlement patterns and human-land relationship in Ghaggar Basin, a region central to early South Asian civilizations. Passionate about bridging the academic archaeology with the public, she contributes regularly to the print and curates insightful exhibitions and education programs aimed at making archaeology accessible to all. This evening, Ms. Ahluwalia will be speaking on changing perspectives in Indian archaeology, where she will discuss how new methods, interdisciplinary collaborations, and inclusive narratives are transforming the way we interpret India's ancient past. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Disha Ahluwalia to deliver today's Pleach Talk. If you have any questions or reflections, please feel free to share them in the chat box. They will be addressed at the end of the session. Before we begin, I request everyone to kindly mute their audio and video to ensure a seamless listening experience. Ms. Disha Ahluwalia, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure really to deliver a talk on this platform. I hope I'm audible. So today's topic really was revolving around one site which was excavated in 2018, re-excavated rather in 2018, and how that excavation really has a potential of changing the perspective around Indian archaeology. And in this today's talk, we'll be mostly dealing with Northern India and how that conversation and that those findings really were blown out of proportion in the social media and also in public domain. So I will be talking about how the narratives and perspectives really changed from early archaeological endeavors to later on, and how it is sort of perceived in the public domain, and what as archaeologists we should be doing, or we should really do in changing circumstances and scenarios. Can you start the slide? Yeah, the next slide, please. So I really wanted to bring out the early perspectives around archaeological discoveries. Those who, I wanted to make this talk more generic rather than a little, rather than academic. So for that purpose, it's important to start a discussion from the colonial period, the perspective that really channeled the early archaeological discoveries. In the beginning of archaeological endeavors in India, the idea was to sort of unearth artifacts rather than unearthing stories, and focus was rather on finding treasures. and migrating those artifacts out of India. Along with that, they were also emphasis was also placed on pushing narratives, so to fill in the blanks in the research. So when the archaeological research really began in India, not much was known about the chronology and or stratigraphy or the dates of early settlements and cultures across the subcontinent. So what was known was from the written, from the perspective of written records, from the monuments that were there, and beyond that, nothing much was known. But slowly and steadily, when discoveries were being made, there were still gaps that persisted within the narrative, within the broader chronoculture time frame of India. So in order to fill that, there were a lot of narratives being pushed by scholars early on, such as the invaders, the Iron Invader narrative, or the narrative of Dark Age, which existed or persisted for a really, really long period of time. Next. So as I've already discussed, most of the early findings were shipped to the museums, shipped to out of India, especially to UK, and all of those artifacts are now housed at British museums. The idea was very simple back then. The archaeology sort of mirrored the colonial power. It was as archaeologists, we had to do simple things such as collecting, classifying, and controlling the India's past. Next. With the colonial thought came the gap in the timeline. It was Alexander Cunningham who started the ASI in 1800s, but despite starting the Archaeological Survey of India, the mindset did not change at all. He himself have taken a lot of antiquities out of India. His idea was also same as his predecessors, that to excavate sites and take the antiquities out of India because that belonged to the crown. And also, since there was a gap in the timeline, he really was of the opinion that nothing existed beyond 6th century BCE in India. There were also another, the politicians in the UK who would go ahead and say things that like India missed the bus of civilization. It is a famous Churchill's quote, which talks about how the gaps in archaeological data really pushed a political narrative around that time. Next. So this was basically what Cunningham had proposed. He said that you have 5th, 6th century data, which can be seen in terms of monuments across the subcontinent. And by then, since Pallavaram's Stone Age, the stone tools were discovered at Pallavaram, he and others, his contemporaries were of the opinion that beyond the Buddhist time was the Stone Age and nothing else. So when he visited Harappa, he actually he found a black stone seal, a black steatite seal with the bull impression on it, and he also dated it to sort of 500 to 400 BCE. Next. But as few decades have passed, by 1921, scenarios started changing in India with the excavation of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. By 1924, it was clear to the archaeologists who were working at these sites, and also to John Marshall and others, that the forgotten civilization has been discovered. The civilization which Churchill have sarcastically sort of pointed out was now being unearthed on the banks of River Indus, and also that the Bronze Age, which has been found in other contemporary civilizations, is now also India is also now home to such culture. Next. So this is what he basically said. I won't repeat it. It's a very famous quote from John Marshall. He was talking about the monumental discovery of Harappa. he called it the Indus Valley Civilization back then, and he compared it with other contemporary cultures that were being discovered. And it was an exciting time, not just for the British officers, but also for Indian archaeologists who were working at these sites. Next. From there was a giant leap in the timeline. And surely, with this giant leap, a perspective also changed and to sort of open the doors to new research. And the reason why I'm talking about this time period is that our story, the story of the Sonali also revolves around these cultures which were found. So it was important to talk about the discovery of the Indus or the Harappan civilization before jumping to Sonali. So in 1924, when Marshall announced to the world that India is the home of another important ancient Bronze Age civilization, it sort of brought the timeline, pushed the timeline back to 3rd millennium BCE, way earlier than what Cunningham has earlier thought when he was the Director General. Next. So as you can see, within a few, this is from Anurjit Larry's book, Finding Forgotten Indian Cities. This map shows us that at different point of time, different scholars have visited sites. For instance, Kalibangan was visited by Tessitori in 1918, and he even excavated that area. He was asked to sort of dig a trench at Kalibangan, and he took a trench at the center of the mound, and he did find a lot of artifacts, including the Harappan seal. But he was unable to give those findings or report those findings back to ASI, and he went back to Italy and never returned. So that discovery, that data sort of vanished with him, and nobody sort of knew as to what Tessitori has really found. Although his diary was later on found in 1944, which later explorer Orelstein has used in his exploration in 1942-44. So his data sort of was recovered much later by the officials of ASI. So for a really long period of time, from 1970s to 40s, Kalibangan was repeatedly explored, but its true nature was never identified. It was not until Harappa was excavated that really that attention was brought to the early cultures. Next. But with the partition of India and Pakistan, much of these discoveries were sort of, brought, sort of divided the archaeological heritage of the two newly found nations. All the sites which were now explored, their postal address were changed, and India was left with no early settlements except for Rangpur and Ropar. So there were not many ancient settlements in the Indian side. Post-independence, it was again the revived ASI that changed the perspective and started to look for more archaeological sites on the eastern domain of Harappan civilization. In 1950, Amananda Ghosh undertook a very important exploration on the banks of Ghaggar river, which is the present-day Ganganagar and Hanumangarh districts of Rajasthan, and he found over 50 Harappan sites in a small region alone. And simultaneously, multiple explorations or expeditions were sanctioned by the survey. Next. So this really, as I've mentioned, it urged the archaeologists to look on the other side. So when there was a gap on the within the political boundary of newly formed India, there were limited sites on the eastern side. It really put a lot of pressure on Indian archaeologists. And here was also a change in the perspective. There were some archaeologists who wanted to who sort of diverted the attention or relied on the epics such as B.B. Lal. He started to explore and started finding evidence of the Mahabharata with his Ganga Satluj Yamuna exploration in 1948-49, which led to the excavation of Hastinapur. There were scholars like A. Ghosh who were finding early settlements, even pre or early Harappan settlements on the bank of a dry Ghakar River. So there were multiple scenarios that existed in the post-independence India as well. Next. So, however, with time today, we know that uh, there has been a shift from colonial discovery to critical inquiry. Science has played a key role in our understanding our past, and that shift is very, very important. However, with changes in narrative perspectives in the archaeological undertaking, the larger perspective plays a very crucial role, and that we'll see in the following slides. Next. So this is just what I created. It's not perfect, but this sort of is what the timeline of India looks. We have the Stone Age, and then you have the early food production period, and then the Harappan, Harappan, and the Chalcolithic. So we can you change the slide, please? This is another illustration to sort of show the timeline. The period that we will be talking about is the period of late Harappan and OCP on the right. It's the period which predates 1500 BCE, sort of begins about 2000 BCE and continues. So you have OCP, which is the ochre color pottery, a culture which is marked by this very a distinguished pottery and also copper artifacts, was contemporaneous with the late Harappan, which is the de-urbanized phase of Harappan civilization. Next. This is a map which shows almost all the sites early to the Harappan, the mature Harappan, and also sites which belong to the late Harappan period. Here you see a site. Can you point to the site of Alamgirpur? The site of Alamgir Pur. If you can see the site of Alamgirpur, which is near to Delhi, near Delhi, north of Delhi. Yeah. If you can just go to Delhi. So around Delhi, the area between Ganga and Yamuna, where you can see Hastinapur on the right side, exactly, where you can see Hastinapur, Alamgirpur. This is the area called as the Ganga Yamuna Doab, an area which is sandwiched by two important rivers, Yamuna and Ganga. This is the area where we find the easternmost boundary of the late Harappan or the deurbanized Harappan period, that is represented by the site of Alamgirpur. Not very far from Alamgirpur is the site of Sanoli, which in the early explorations and excavation was noted as a late Harappan site because it falls within the Harappan domain. So it was a thought of early archaeologists that these demarcations, that there are these distinct demarcations. There cannot be an overlap. Because if you explore that region, you will find more similar sites like Sanoli or OCP sites. In fact, near Hastinapur also, when Bibilal was excavating Hastinapur, he did find copper hoard nearby Hastinapur. So copper hoard and Harappan culture or the early cultures have sort of coexisted, and there is a shift in narrative that has come in a recent time. Next. Next. So here, this is a map which is not quite clear, but here you can see different later cultures. You can see the cemetery edge or the later Uppan culture. Alamgirpur being a very important site. Sonali is south of Alamgirpur, which also forms with which actually is part of this peachish bubble that defines the late Harappan. But it's we'll discuss its chronology in a minute. Next. And also, you can see, can you go to the previous slide, please? You can see on the right, these are anthropomorphic figures. These are copper anthropomorphic figures, which are marker of the copper horde or OCP culture. And these anthropomorphs are found at many copper horde sites. Copper hordes are rather largely accidental in discovery, but at the site of Saipai, they were found in the archaeological context for the first time. That's how the copper horde and OCP got a stratified were established in a chronology of the northern half of the subcontinent. Next. You can see in this map that late Harappan sites, and I mean, please ignore the term Aryan here. The map I've taken it from Wiki Commons. But the reason why I wanted to put this here to show you that there's an overlap of space. There's a spatial overlap of different cultures which were coexisting at the same time in same geographical region. Next. Uh, Next. So now we'll talk about Sonali. Sonali is a very important site and a site which actually brought a lot of clarity and also stirred a lot of debate in the ongoing issues of this very demarcation of late Harappan and other cultures and how the cultures sort of coexisted. Early archaeologists were busy in sort of identifying the cultures. They were busy creating a skeleton, as B. Subbarao has said. But in late, as we have moved away from creating from this, already existing stratigraphy, it's important for us to talk about or investigate into the gaps which exist in our understanding, and that those gaps, as Subbarao has also pointed out in Personality of India, will help us to add flesh and blood to the skeleton that has been put together by early excavators. Next. So Sonali, as you can see, is again between the two major river, and between the river there are multiple tributaries and distributaries of Ganga and Yamuna. Sonali is on the banks of Yamuna, and there are other important sites for Chandayan. I will talk about that site again. And Barnava is actually an early historic site, not a proto-historic site. So Sonali was first reported by D.K. Chakrabarti in Pragdhara. He has reported a few OCP-like pottery at the site in 2003. And in 2005, at one of the, because Sonali is flat, there is sugarcane cultivation on top of the site. So the owner of that field was digging up a sort of a trench or a hole there for a borewell, and he found a skeleton with a lot of copper objects such as bangles and other objects, and that really intrigued him and he created a chaos in the village, which attracted attention from the administration. And the district magistrate then contacted the ASI, who then excavated the area in 2005 and 6. It was a 13-month-long excavation, which unearthed over 116 burials at the site. At that time, the primary excavator Dr. D.V. Sharma noted that the site is a late Harappan burial site with some elements of copper hoard. So elements such as antenna swords and other copper artifacts were not, they did not match with the Harappan affiliation or Harappan characteristics. Rather, they were different and they belong more with the OCP or copper hoard cultural milieu, and but the pottery was very similar to the late Harappan pottery, which is why they labeled it as a late Harappan necropolis, or the biggest necropolis or late Harappan context with some elements of copper hoard. Next. So there on the right, you can see an area where the excavation of 2005 was undertaken. They took a trench a big trench, and they excavated 116 barrels. 3 phases of burial practices were noticed. Uh, in 2018, Dr. Manjul, who was excavating Barnawa at that time, decided to take up a small trench in this area. You can see a yellow sort of a tent over it. He decided to take a trench here, a small trench, a 10 by 10 meter trench, to excavate a burial and also to take samples. The idea was simply to take samples for DNA and also for other scientific analysis, because that was lacking from previous excavation. Next. So these are images from the early excavation. You can see multiple burials being excavated. There's burials in a series. On the right, bottom right, there is a stair-type, sort of an 8-figure feature which was found by the excavator. D.V. Sharma argued that this represent a human form, and on within this stereotype like outline, there are arrowheads inlaid. Next. So when in the month in 2018 the excavation began, the idea, as I've mentioned, was simply to get a sample for various analysis and nothing else. But as the excavation progressed, initially it was limited to 10 by 10 meter, but then it progressed and uncovered 8 burials, out of which 3 were legged coffins, and they also yielded 3 chariots, and the rest were symbolic burials. Next. So as I've mentioned, there were so in the later excavation, also in 2019, there were additional 2 more coffin burials were also found, and I will discuss as to how we came to the conclusion that these are coffin burials. Next. So, as you can see, these are multiple. This is a compilation of the early excavation as well as the later excavation, 2018, 19, 1920. For 2 seasons, Sanoli was re-excavated, and you can find here 2 multiple burials have been found. I will go one by one, talking about each feature in the following slides. Next. This is burial number 1. When the excavation began, as you can see, the skeleton is totally disturbed because it's right on top of the surface. And since the cultivation was being taking place on top of the surface, that has really hampered and damaged the top layer. Next. So when we were excavating this burial number 1, we had no idea that this is a skeleton. We went by the similar perspective that when we find a burial, we need to look for a burial pit. That is a methodology that most of us follow in the field. The moment we see a burial, we need to trace a pit line. When we find a pit line, we excavate within the pit line, and that's it. But here, we started finding pods around the skeleton when we were digging. So we had no clue that there were pods beneath the layer which is with the skeleton. So we started digging rather very haphazardly without much care, and that really disturbed few pods, big pods. And as we were excavating it, the team found this particular bone comb at the bottom, and also you can see the level of the comb and the pot on the left is same, and the way that particular vessel is tilted and lying shows that wherever that pot is resting is the base level, and the comb is also resting on that very base level. So that's where it was a eureka moment, and we understood that the context is same. So from the traditional way of excavating, finding a pit line and then digging into it, we had to change the methodology, and that was looking at the context rather than following the basic norms of archaeology or basic practice of archaeology. The moment we found this, we started digging slowly. It was a slow pace excavation where each feature was left the way it was. It was not disturbed, and you will see in following slides. Next. So you can see the way the pots have been kept, how from the left top image is how we were really excavating. The sediment is very hard, it's clay, and it was very, very difficult. No matter how much you scrape it off, it was very difficult to find a pit line. So as a precaution, we took a decision to keep the distance from the skeleton and the cutting a sort of a uniform distance. And then we dug on two sides, and that's when we found multiple pots, the bone, comb, and beads, and also pots at the bottom level, which showed that this particular skeleton was kept on an elevated elevated surface. It is not so now, and also we went back to the early excavations where the similar phenomenon it was also reported, where in few pictures it shows that the head of the skeleton is resting on the pot, and it's actually very difficult for the head of a skeleton to really rest on a pot. You can see at the bottom where the stomach of the deceased is, there is a sort of a bend, and that bend was found in different other in other burials as well, where we understood that the wooden structure on which the skeleton was placed sort of when it was being decomposed, it cracked from the center and it bent. That's why there's a sharp bend at the center of the body rather than from the where the head are or where the feet are, and also because below that there is these plethora of pots and other objects being kept. Next. Next. So this is burial number 3, one of the most important burial. You can see different features at the site in this particular trench. So once we understood and we changed our methodology on site, it was very things progressed fast. And here you see a sort of a rectangular feature at the center of this burial pit, and then you would see various pottery, where the wheel is marked as actually a wheel of the chariot. Then there is an 8-figure like feature again, which appeared in 2005 and 6 excavation. But the only difference is this time it is covered with copper inlays. In the previous excavation, they found it with the steatite inlays. Then there was an antenna sword, a dagger, and also a torch, which was found in this burial pit. Next. There's another view of this particular burial. There was no skeleton. There were only few scattered bones, but beads were being found. Our assumption was that since you can see it's right on the top, on the surface. It must have been this particular burial is completely disturbed. So, which is why we found some scattered bones in different places, not in one context at all. Next. This is how the team realized that what they are excavating are actually coffin burials, the legged, a leg furniture or something on which the skeleton was kept. And the reason why it was very conclusive, because the copper sheet is sort of wrapped around the wood. So around the wood, there are copper sheet, and copper retain would decompose, but copper remained the way it was with patination. And that copper helped us outline the coffin. And in this particular example, we found all 4 legs on both sides, and also we found the base, and you can see how the pottery is being kept on the base. So this gave us an overview how the pottery, how the burial was really prepared, and under the coffin between the two legs, you can see other copper objects being kept, such as a copper rod. At times, they have also kept a chalice. I will show another example. So they have also kept other objects, and in 2019-20 excavation, we have found that the coffins at the below the coffin, there are big globular pots that are kept and kept right at the center, and also other objects made of steatite and wood, not just copper and wood. Next. So this is how the reconstruction would have been, and you would ask, like, as to how did we come to the conclusion that this is a chariot? Below the eight-figure shield, when we removed the shield, when we were lifting it and bring excavating it further, we started finding the pole and the yoke with copper inlay. That's how we got to know that the main body of this particular chariot would have been made with largely with wood, not much copper work, but the pole and the yoke had copper triangular inlays, which helped us identify the remains of a chariot. Next. So you can see here below at the figure, which is at the right bottom, you can see copper triangulars peeping from the bottom below the eight-figure shield. And then you can see an overview of the legs and also how uh, other objects such as the antenna, sword, and dagger are kept. And the decision which was made by Dr. Manjul at the right time to underline the context rather than go by the other or use different methods of recording was very crucial, because if we had gone by the traditional methodology where we excavate 10 centimeters and we note a feature and then we go below, or we take, or if we had taken a smaller trench, this intact context would have not been excavated. Next. So I've shown you this particular eight figure, which was found in 2017, 2005 and 6 by Dr. D.V. Sharma and his team. Dr. Manjul found this in the ASI's archive, and he got the permission to do a CT scan. So he used the scanning to understand as to what it was, and you can see the rafts, the wooden rafts are easily visible in the scan. You can easily understand how they have been nailed, and if you zoom in closer to such images, you can see that they have also been nailed. So there are smaller wooden beams, and they are sort of nailed by another a wooden sort of outline, and then there are steatite inlays in it. So it is, the entire thing was made of wood, which is possibly could be a shield. And we do find evidence of such shields in contemporary civilizations. Also in India, there have been no evidence prior to this one. Next. So this is what I was talking about. You may have not understood when I was from a 90-degree angle about the wheel, but you can see on the right an image where the triangles are in a radiating pattern. The center, there is a gap, and then they are in a radiating pattern. They're very uniform. And this is one of the wheels of a chariot, and this particular yoke and the pole we found only after we've removed all other objects which were lying on it. So if you remember the previous slides, the shield was lying in a slanting manner on top of this pole. Next. Next. Now, this is pit number 5. This was a symbolic burial. There were multiple pots. And this is a very, very important specimen, which brings out a very new perspective in terms of understanding the OCP and copperwood culture in India. And it sort of rejects or bursts the myths which were, you know, the narratives which were spread by early scholars like Hewlett, who worked on OCP. Here you see a sword which has a hilt, and then there is an antenna which is peeping through. And there's another example next to it, the one which is on top. If you can point it to the one on the top. Um, that yeah, no, the one next to it, the antenna sword. Yeah, this one. So this is an antenna sword with sort of like this antennas at the at the base. Here you can see that there is no hilt, that as in there is no place for a person to hold this particular sword, because if the person will hold it from the antenna onwards, it's very difficult to use it, because then there are danger for, because you're very close to the blade or a sharp edge, and it's very difficult for you to use it. So what Yule has proposed, because most of the swords found within the horde context were like this, and what he proposed were that these antenna swords are symbolic or ritualistic in nature, they cannot be used. But here is another example at the bottom. The big sword shows that there is an antenna, but then there is a wooden handle attached to it, which is wrapped in this case with a copper wire. Because of the copper wiring, the team was able to unearth it completely, rather than, if it would have been just wood, we would have found the one other example which is on the top, on actually on the left, but not the one with the hilt. So the hilt antenna sword is the first of its kind. It's not been found in any other hordes. We find without the hilt, but with the hilt, cancels or rejects the theory of Yule that these swords are for ritualistic purpose. It shows us that they have a utilitarian purpose. Next. So this is another view of burial 5. Next. So this is the measurements of the swords. And you can clearly see that the one which is on the right, you can use it, whereas the one on, one on the left, you can use it, whereas one on the right, it's difficult to use it because your hand would be very close, or rather on the sharp edge. So you need a wooden handle, and the one which is of 65 centimeters, you can see that the wooden handle was attached to the copper sword, and then that wood was encased in a copper wiring. Next. Next. So this is one of the most important burial pits that were found at Sonali. Again, it was an accidental discovery, just like other pits, but this is one of the most important, one of the most elaborate burials being found at Sonali in the 3 seasons that it was excavated. Next. From this angle, you can very well see that there is a feature which has these copper inlays and various figures. And at the bottom, there is a chalice with a tortoise where the cursor is. You can see a chalice which is kept upside down. And then in the other image, you can see various pottery and also the leg. So you can see different stages of excavation. Initially, the team who was excavating in this particular pit, they only were finding this decorative motifs on the top layer. And then slowly, when they demarcated it, you can see the threads being attached. When they demarcated the extent of these decorative motifs, they cut through and they found the chalice, which is kept upside down. And then when they went beyond, and Dr. Manjul did some measurements because the previous pit that I've shown, the coffin was already being excavated. So the excavators had a very good idea as to that this particular structure will also have a leg. So they took precise measurements and they found the legs as well. Next. So this is how it was found initially. You can see that there are these copper figures on top. There are basically anthropomorphic figures with a horned headgear carved all throughout. Next. this is how the excavation progressed initially. So the idea was simple. We knew the team was very well aware that this is a burial site. So of course it's dealing with human burials. And since this feature in the top image you can see is running across a couple of feet. So it really made sense that perhaps it's covering a coffin or covering a structure or something which holds the human remains or maybe symbolizes the human remains. The ideas were running, being thrown around really, and that's when Dr. Vinay Kumar Roy, who's the supervisor at that particular time, he because he was the tallest person, all of us were quite short, so he decided to lay down and we took a measurement because also where his head is, if you look, if you see in the same direction, a fragment of skull like this part was also found. So by then the team was aware that this is where the skull will be, and this is the probable length. So then the measurement was taken, and that's how the cuttings were made. Otherwise, it's very difficult at Sonali looking at the sediment to make any random cuttings because you can find anything anywhere. Next. This is a close-up of the anthropomorphic inlays or carvings on top of the coffin's lid. Next. So in this particular trench, the two chariots have been found, three chariots in total, but this particular trench yielded two chariots. Next. So this is this trench with this burial pit with the human, the anthropomorphic figure and the legged coffin. Here you can see the image on the right that there are two chariots placed next to each other. The pole of one chariot is bent and is resting on the pole of another chariot. But the wheels are very clear. So is the chassis and other pole and other things, even the hooks, and also a D-shaped frame was also excavated. Next. You can see here's another view. It's very clear that this is not a symbolic chariot. It is a working chariot which has been put in the burial pit. Next. You can see the nails and the hooks. A lot of work has been put in crafting these chariots, which are not known earlier to people or to us archaeologists, and it was very difficult to excavate. And we can see in this image on the left, you can see near the pole there's another frame which is running through. That is a D-shaped frame that was excavated. Next. So this is a basic reconstruction. With this particular coffin, we were only able to find a few legs, not all legs. We found there are different artifacts which were below the trend, below the coffin. The coffin is not opened. And this is a very good example of a coffin lid and how ornate it is. And there is copper everywhere, copper in inlays, copper in nails, and rivets, etc. And there are plethora of pots that have been found as well. Next, there's also in this trench that we have also found a silver and an electrum cap, which could be a cap of maybe it would have encased on a stick or something, but a cap has also been found. This is the reconstruction of these chariot as to how they would have looked like. Of course, when the pit was excavated by the communities who were burying the dead, they must have made an irregular pit. But for our understanding, we excavated a very regular pit, and also we basically took a center and then extended around it, so we don't disturb any context. And you can see in the image in the left bottom how the copper is encased around the leg. That's how we identify the legs. Next. This is another reconstruction of the chariot that has that is being found. There's a D-shaped frame, there is a socket, there are pipes which may be holding a canopy. We don't know much about it. There is a pole and a yoke, and it's very evident that there is a chariot. A lot of people have also suggested that this is a cart, and I think I've missed out on adding that in the conversation here in the slides, but nowhere will this be a cart, because a cart, for that the axle has to be little further back, not at the center of the cart, but little, near the back, so that it balances the cart in such a way. If you look at the axle, where the wheels are and the axle is, and how it is attached to the chassis and other mechanics, you can see it's at the center, it's holding the wheel. There are also theories being thrown around that there were four wheels, but we did excavate in the following season at the back and we found nothing. Next. Here are a few more images of the nails in the socket and the T-shaped frame and the chassis and other features of the chariot. Next. This is the recreation of the pole. You may have seen this in the documentary of Sonali as well. Next. Next. Now, burial 7 and 8 were symbolic burial. There are multiple pots, and they're part of one burial. The other have a skeleton of an animal, and this is a cat skeleton. It was earlier thought to be a dog skeleton, but now it's been revealed that it's a cat skeleton. And around it, you can see a white square or rectangular sort of objects. Those are not random; those are steatite beads, and perhaps they must have been either on a shroud, or they must have been given as an offering while bearing the pet animal. Next. Next. Now, burial number, here again, this is the twin burial. This is burial number 8. It's again, it's a secondary context, and the offerings that I was talking about are very clear here. Multiple, necklaces or something must have. They are part of the offerings, and you have plethora of pottery, and these are two different individuals. They were buried initially somewhere else, and then the remains were removed from the initial place of burial and then buried again at the site here. Next. Now, burial number 9 and 10 were excavated in 2009, 19 and 20's excavation, along with a chamber-like feature within the burial complex, as I like to call it. Burial number 9 and 10 are different from the previous burials that you have seen, and they are different because here copper is not used. Rather, steatite is used as a decoration on copper. The closest example is that if you go to South India, especially in Mysore and around the region, you find a lot of wooden furniture with a lot of shell inlays or marble inlays, so like that. So that decoration is very beautiful. They create different motifs, and also in North as well, you have marble inlaid wooden furniture. So that is the closest example that I can find to tell you that a wooden coffin was made, and then within that, steatite was used as an object for inlaying. Next. This is one burial, and you can see from the pelvis there is a dent. That is because around the near the legs and the base of the coffin, there were at the bottom there were big pots, but where the pelvis and the stomach area is of the disease, there is nothing, and the wooden coffin has sort of collapsed and there is a dent. Next. You can see the steatite inlays, and there is another object which is at the bottom of the coffin, which must be a wooden object with an inlays, and you can see burial number 9, a lot of steatite inlays. And it was this was actually even more difficult than the chariot, the copper coffins, because unlike copper, steatite is very small, very thin, and if you keep scraping without knowing or without keeping much attention, if you're too harsh in excavation, it will perish and you will not find. And we did make a couple of mistakes while excavating, because honestly, none of us expected, given that in the previous season we found all copper burial coffins. Here we also expected copper, but Sonali again surprised us with straight-eyed coffins, and it was very, very difficult. We had to really pace our speed and mold our excavation techniques again. Next. So if you can go to the previous slide, please. So you can see, and also before that, can you go 2 slides before? Yeah, here you see the world chamber. Initially, when our students, because this was the work done by Institute of Archaeology, so there were a lot of students who've been trained. So the students who were working here, they only they trace the outer bricks, and because there's a road where the green sheet is, that's a road, and it was very difficult initially to understand what exactly this particular structure was, because the bricks were only been excavated on 2 sides. So when the section was cleared a bit, and I could see that a lot of pottery is not in alignment. It really suggests that this is a secondary deposit which has been deposited, not a primary, which means that a platform was not created, which earlier we thought that this could be a platform, but the section really told us, and this the way the features were, such as different brick bias, etc., it really indicated to me that this was not a platform. There has to be the third wall or the third angle running somewhere, but unfortunately, because there's a road, I had to undercut and then excavate. Next, can you go to the next slide? Next. So this is how we had to do. We had to, so this is an overview initially how it looked like when we were excavating. We excavated only at the center to see whether there's something, and then can you go to the previous slide? So we had to undercut it, and then we found a sort of an intact wall which was running through. And where my legs are, you can see that there's another section of the structure which is fallen. So the idea was to excavate the way it was and not to disturb the context. And that really panned out. Next. Next. So you can see another angle here as well. Um, it was where the scale is kept, that is the entrance to this particular structure, and the bricks which are fallen, and you can see the face, that was the second layer. So you have the first layer of brick wall, and then you have the second layer, and the space in the center was quite small. You can see multiple, so there were multiple layers of bricks being laid out as like a step, like a step structure, in simple terms. Next. So, because one fine day, when we were just wrapping up the excavation, there was a procession going on. A disease was being carried by the loved ones, and there was a procession. And this particular feature is used by the Muslim communities in various parts of the countries, I assume. But in that area, this is where sort of like a bed being made, and that is where they put the deceased, and they carry it to the burial ground. So one fine day, Dr. Manju saw this, and then next day he asked somebody in the village to get this as a sample, and they got it and really fit well. And this particular thing really went with the measurement of the burial, which had no skeleton, the leg coffin, which had no skeleton. So this measurement really went with that. Next. He also, in regards to the previous slide, Dr. Manjul is also the opinion that this perhaps was the area where the people who have been buried would go and they would be conduct some rituals. We didn't find any ash, so that discards any possibility of any havan or any other fire-related ritual. So perhaps when the burial or the pit's been prepared, the body is brought to that area and then proceeded for the burial. This is just a conjecture, and we found nothing else beyond this really. Another interesting, so you can see the area of 2005 and 6 excavation is pretty close to where we excavated and where our camp was. So on a one fine day in the evening, actually, when it was raining, and in our camp, we have to sort of take care of our own drainage. So because it was raining and we didn't wanted any of our tents to sort of get flooded by the water, the people were in our camp, they were digging up drains in front of our tents and behind. While they were doing so, they found few features. Next. This they found this sort of features. Initially thought that, and what was interesting, that some such feature was also found in 2005 and 6 excavation, but its interpretation was left was there was no interpretation really given to it. It was proposed that perhaps they were used for cremation. But as we were excavating, and the way that we started finding the context really cleared the air and told us that these are really furnaces, not meant for cremation. Next. So you can see it's right where our camp was, and they are in series, in sort of suggesting that it was one workshop. And we initially I was skeptical because I was not able to find any air duct. Of course, from the furnaces we did find a lot of slag, copper slag, and we found a lot of anvils, we found a lot of bones, a lot of evidence which do point to a furnace. But you have if you have such a large furnace, you need to have an air duct, you need to have other features. Eventually we did find air duct. We found where a place from where they would um, sort of have the ignition and everything else, and all of them were in one, um, you know in uh, in one line, a very beautifully organized, very uniform in nature. But besides that, I didn't find any superstructure. We didn't find much post holes. Maybe we were unable to detect them. We didn't find any other evidence which can connect to the superstructure at this point. Next. See, there's another view of the furnaces that we found. Next. This is a close-up view, and the clay is vitrified and it's very hard, and there are a lot of pottery, a lot of copper slag, a lot of bones which were found from the um, uh, the bottom of the furnaces. Instead of ash and other things, the clay is very sticky, is very vitrified, even in the inside, which tells us that it was used for a purpose which requires higher temperature, and rigorously was used. Whereas in the case of cremation, you would find a lot of loose ash, and the features would be totally different. Next. So recently a paper was published which a lot of people initially, when Sonali was made news, a lot of people did suggest that these are Bronze Age objects, and analysis were done, and XRF analysis tells us that this was largely copper with other elements, and it may not be bronze. There are a lot of conservation and preservation challenges to these features, as they've been carried with us after the excavation, and they are still being tackled. At the moment, the chariots are on the view in the museum, I suppose, but their preservation is going to be a big challenge, and the ASI is working in preserving them. Hopefully, successfully, they will preserve it for a long time. Next. So ASI is Sonali is important because of the chariots, the select coffins, the shield, the weapons, and the furnaces. So earlier, when the Sonali was excavated in 2005, the habitation was not known. But with the furnaces, we at least know the working area which goes beyond the burial, which connects to the people, and not just the dead. Next. This is just repetition. Next. One of the most important things, can you go to the previous slide, please? Just once. One of the most important things, a point of debate really was whether Sonali is a later Upland site with copper hoard, or is it an OCP site and with the later Upland elements in it. So this was one of the debates really, or a point of investigation when Dr. Manjul and his team was excavating. And through analysis and after careful examination of various artifacts, it is proof that Sonali actually is an OCP a site which is affiliated to OCP Copperwood, but it does not mean that there is no contact with its contemporary and neighbor, late Harappan settlements, the deurbanized Harappan settlements. Of course, there is a contact. We do find a lot of agate beads, a lot of carnelian beads in the burial. So those are coming through trade contacts. And that is a point where we need to look at. In archaeological perspective, if I see, we often look at things, we often look at the similarities. We rarely look at the dissimilarities, and if we do even look at the dissimilarities, we don't usually go beyond and try to understand how the two distinct cultures were really communicating with each other, living in harmony, or what sort of contact two communities, two different archaeology cultures had. The way our stratigraphy goes, it seems as if it's so rigid. It saddens me to even see today's many archaeologists talk of archaeology and stratigraphy in such a rigid and linear fashion. Sonali and various other sites and various other findings that have been happening and discoveries that have been happening clearly tells us that there is non-linearity which existed, and there are a lot of collaboration between various communities which can be different from each other, yet they share a space. So two different communities can share space. It's very important to really understand and underline. Next. If you were to believe that Sonali was the only site, it's not true. Actually, in 2014, prior to the excavation, re-excavation of Sonali, very close to Barnava at Chandayan, a skeleton was found, a skull was found with this sort of a copper crown, as per the archaeologist. Next. This is where Chandayan is and Sonali. They're not very far, about 25 kilometers away from each other. There's another site called Tilwara, which is mapped, pointed on the map. Please remember that site as well. You can see here there are statite objects which resemble to a lot of Sonali, Harappan elements, but you also have bead, which is again coming from contact from the Western India. Copper again must be coming from contact, but here you see at the center, there's this antenna sort of a thing. This is a part of an antenna sword in the image here, which were found. They were actually detached. They were not found together. But in the reconstruction, the early excavators have put it together. There's a probability that this is a part of an antenna sword, again linking it to a copper hold element. Next. This is the side of Tilwara. As per the antiquity and the cultural affiliation, it's very much closer to Sonali, also in terms of pottery and other artifacts. I don't know the details of the site much, but there is a probability that they have also found another wheel at the site. Uh, but it shows that the area is quite rich and there is a lot of potential. Next. Now, Sonali is, of course, is in the eye of the storm very recently. There are a lot of narratives that have been pushed, and there are a lot of repercussions. It really stirred the debate. It may seem like just another side, but actually, it tells us. It really begs us to look beyond the set narratives within the archaeology and also in the public domain. Next. So when you look at the competing narratives, there is one of archaeological interpretation, which we have to deal with in terms of whether it's a later up on an OCP site. We have other narratives being competing narratives in terms of the scientific undertaking, whether it's copper, bronze, etc. DNA is one of the questions that unfortunately we were not able to solve at Sonali. And the third is the public narrative. Next. The repercussions are, of course, that you are being labeled, the site is labeled for no reason. I mean, Sonali, it's very important here to understand that we need to keep the interpretation of an archaeologist's work and the facts a little differently. Here, what I showed you are the facts that have been found at the site. Interpretation could vary. I worked at Sonali. My understanding and interpretation could vary a bit. It could vary from Dr. Manju's, and it can be different of various other people. What is, however, important that these are chariots, these are coffin bearers, they are very, very important. And instead of undertaking an academic reassessment, and also in terms of in our focus as archaeologists, my focus, if you were to ask me about Sonali, will be towards academic reassessment, scientific analysis, and excavating it more, because we did do a collaboration with University of Durham. Did LIDAR, we did GPR magnetometry, and we found potential areas for excavation. Sadly, excavation was stopped midway and we were not able to excavate again. The license was not renewed, which really put this whole, research, paused this entire research. And a lot of loose ends are there, which has perhaps caused a lot of media speculations, etc. Next. I mean, in the end, I just want to say that Sonali really, beyond excavation, it also tells us that archaeology in India still operates at the intersection of science, politics, and identity. It's important that it's very difficult to differentiate between the three. Yet, as archaeologist and as somebody who represents the archaeological community, our objective and what we do in the field is always more cohesive, more scientific, and more logical in nature rather than anything else. Thank you. Yeah, this is just acknowledgement to the ASI, the DG, and the excavation branch team and the villagers who really helped us at every step.
Thank you, Dishaji. It is really an amazing talk, as if you have taken us all through the site itself, and we were part of the excavating team following your footsteps there. Then saw each and everything right from the humus layer down to the next layer, where we really touched upon physically the what you call uncovering of the shade, uncovering of again the royal chariot, then the coffins, and not speculating that, I think you are really correct that it has some connection with the late Harappan and OCP. It is clearly proved. So you as really, it doesn't leave any stone unturned. And since it is so clear, and you have very successfully dealt the topic that the changing perspectives of the narrative of Indian archaeology, beginning with the story of archaeology, various villages, everything. So it doesn't give any scope for what to call receiving many queries except only one that really speaks, and what we call is your sincere commitment to share your ideas in what we call understanding in clear terms the changing perspectives of Indian archaeology. Thank you so much. And may I just open the chat box so that
Yes,
the
yes.
one or two queries are there? Yes. Question for this thing. I think forgot me. Uh, his name, we forgot. Hey, Disha, thanks for the interesting presentation. I'm not an archaeologist, but an economist. Please pardon my ignorance, if any, in my question. Is there any book, monograph, etc., where all the findings and interpretations of the Sinoli excavation since 2005 are consolidated in a single text resource? I have downloaded all the published articles on Sinoli, but I am looking for a consolidated resource. Can you please uh,
Um,
answer the query? He is Mr. Kulkarni. He,
Thank
he,
you for the
he,
question.
he is a Shiv Hastawala.
Unfortunately, there is no consolidated report or anything from excavation of 2005. There are few papers which you've said that you have downloaded. The report of our excavation is already submitted to ASI. It's with the Director General's office, and we are hoping that soon that report will be published. And we did try to give little bit of overview, but unfortunately, since the data is excavated by some other excavator, it's not published as of now.
So, there are no other queries. Then I
Okay.
have got what you call. I want to share my own understanding that Sanjay Manjuji and your team became the heroes of what you call the excavation during that period way back in 2023. Everybody in India was looking for what you call put the speculation be put the speculation be consolidated with a concrete idea that it has some connection with the royal chariot and those bronze affiliation taking to some what we call some war connected to the most popular episode that is in the minds of the people of India. Will you show throw some light on it?
Yeah, the great battle is what you're talking about. The Mahabharata is the Kurukshetra battle. Uh, of course, these chariots, and I've mentioned that it's very clear if we look at the chariots, even in the images, they are not just ritualistic or representative chariots. They are used chariots, like they were used in the field. And the fact that we found a lot of weaponry in various contexts tells us that this is a martial class. These people, even the female burials in the later 9th and 10th burial, 9 and 10, we did find hilts and the swords with the female burials as well. So it does tell us that that was the symbol of the community at that point of time. There is a martial class within the ancient period. Whether it's linked to the Mahabharata, it's a very different query. And as I see it, Dr. Manjul may see it little differently because he's way senior to me, so he has more idea into all of this. But the way I see it, having worked at PGW, having worked in the Harappan context in that region, I feel that we need to do more work.
Yes.
As archaeologists at this point, my intention would be to excavate more, to find more, and go ahead with the established fact that these people, and as you can see, this is a complex of 8 burials, and beyond that 8 burials there was an empty space, and then the next burial complex starts. So the people who are in this complex who were buried, they do belong to a noble class. They are rich because to they you need money to create these chariots. You need money for the coffins. You do need to be little affluent. I mean, whatever the currency, the barter would have been that time, but you do need to have resources for all of this. So
Yes.
it's very, very important to underline that yes, it's a martial class. Yes, it does reflect to a stratification within the society, that there are some people who are fluent, there are some people who are not. Um, it also reflects the choices and the uniformities within the culture, and also the dissimilarities. Whether it's of link to Mahabharata, it's difficult now to assess, because there's so much that we will have to do to answer that question. Because there is already an archaeological theory running. With one side, it's very difficult, as I see it. However, what it tells us, it the story of the war, which, as you rightly pointed out, that all Indians, the moment you talk of the chariots and the wars, we our minds immediately go to the Kurukshetra war. It tells us that those stories have some semblance or resemblance into the physical reality, whether that of that period or earlier or later, we don't know yet. I mean, if I'm able to put
Yes,
my
yes,
point
yes.
across.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. We are eagerly waiting for what you call resuming the excavations so that many more path-breaking discoveries would come.
Thank you. Thank
There
you
is,
so much.
there is one more query from Mr. Srinath. Hello, madam. It was truly one of the finest presentations on Sinoli, offering fresh insights and new interpretations based on recent results. Are there any new sites proposed for excavation connected with in this context?
No, unfortunately, no. So far, no. No sites been proposed. I mean, I hope that there is a project, and this requires a project. As I've mentioned, there are other sites also which did show similar evidence. So one site alone cannot answer. If we want a holistic answer approach, or we want to answer bigger questions, we need to excavate in a series. So of course, there's a need of the project, and hoping that sooner or later there will be a project on this.
Thank you. Do you have any plan, any idea that ASI is going to resume the excavations in short time? Or,
Sonali, at Sonali?
yes, yes.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there are any plans as of now, because no, I have not heard. I think the need is to publish the report first, and that was, I think, one of our objectives as a team, was also to submit the report. And now that we have submitted the report, it has given us time to revisit Sonali and to look at it in different perspective. We are just hoping, and maybe with a new perspective, with a new idea, we'll come up with a new project, or someone else will come up with a new project.
Yes, thank you, madam. Then
Thank you.
one small, what you call it, is not at all a question, but he wants to share his ideas. Mr. Shiv Shankar Babu from Chennai. Yes, it is also interesting to note that chariots disappeared from the military scene by 10th century CE. The big Chola army did not have chariot regiments as it because of the comfort in the gigantic plains. Do you have any other view?
No, you're absolutely right. Because of the plains, the terrain is not difficult to navigate through chariots. It's not that difficult. It's quite flat. And I'll tell you just one small story. Every day in the morning, there would be this person. He would ride a bullock cart, like as though he's riding a chariot. He will stand and he'll have two bulls running, and he'll race them
Great.
every day on that road which has shown, which is adjacent to a trench. So it really proves what you're saying, and absolutely right. But the terrain is very important, and how you achieve the goal of a chariot is a faster moving vehicle. And in a situation of a conflict, you do need that. So you're absolutely right. I mean, this really adds up to why chariots were not being used in certain areas at a point.
Thank
Right.
you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Then we express our profound thanks to Disha Ahluwalia for an excellent talk on changing perspectives in Indian archaeology. The Pleach India Foundation also thanks the audience for their participation and for making Pleach Talk memorable. This is to inform you that our next Pleach Talk is scheduled on 7th November 2025 at 5 p.m. by Miss Sakina is educator, writer, and researcher who will be speaking on heritage and power, tracing women's impact, Deccan 1600s, 1800s. I will repeat. This is to inform you that our next Pleach Talk is scheduled on 7th November 2025 at 5 p.m. by Miss Sakina is educator, writer, and researcher who will be speaking on heritage and power, tracing women's impact, Deccan 1600s, 1800s. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you